Hey everyone, it's time for my update video, and I want to thank Sophia for asking about it and lighting fire under me to get this out there and finally get us up to date, at least with the surgery part. If you haven't seen my previous video regarding my naive expectations for the surgery, click here or here to check out that video for the full context. So this video, I'm going to go over what my expectations were and what the reality was for this surgery / procedure. And before the surgery, I did a lot of research. I researched a lot on the internet, as well as pored over all the documents and papers that my surgeon gave me before the surgery. And that's what my expectations were based on. So let's take that lens and look through it to see what I was expecting versus what actually happened, shall we? Number 1, I expected this to be an in and out procedure. The reality, it was. Number 2, I was not expecting to have a hemorrhoid removed. It was just fissurectomy to clear out tissue and the lump that was in the rectal area and a Botox injection. The reality was that they had to remove a hemorrhoid. So more work was done than I was expecting. I woke up and they told me, and what was I going to do? Tell them to put it back? They did remove the mass from my rectum, and it turned out it was a fibroepithelial polyp, which is essentially just a benign mass that accumulated in the area because of the inflammation from the fissure itself. So yeah, it was exactly as my surgeon thought it would be. Number 3, I was expecting that I was going to have bandages in my butt. The reality was no bandages, no packing in my butt. All I had were 3 stitches, which were dissolvable, and what they didn't tell me would dissolve and fall out within 3 to 5 days of healing. When you're expecting to have stitches in there for a while and keeping things together, it's a little shocking when you wipe and you see either stitches or you see stitches in the toilet. So there was a little bit of panic over that, and it wasn't the only panic in this process. Number 4, I expected the pain to be no worse than the fissure itself. The reality, when you go and get a shot or get blood drawn and they put the needle and it passes through the skin, and that initial stages of skin before it hits the vein, that really intense stinging that happens, and then once it gets through the vein it kind of settles down to just like an ache, and then they take the blood and so forth. You know that feeling? Once the pain set in after the surgery, which was that night, it stung. And it stung like that. Only it didn't get better. It only got worse and worse and worse. It didn't ache. It didn't throb. I wasn't sore. It stung. Number 5, I expected to take care of the pain with just Tylenol and sheer force of will. The reality, thank you, Percocet. Thank you, Percocet. Tylenol didn't even touch the pain. I was so scared of the Percocet because I'd seen so many others get stomach sick on them that I didn't want to put my body through that, especially with the surgical site now open down in my asshole. It just felt like a strain. Plus, I hate vomiting and I don't want to do it. But by the end of the day, after my surgery into the night, I had so much of the pain neurotransmitter in my system, I started to feel nauseous and felt like I was going to be sick anyway. So I figured if I was going to be sick, I might as well be pain-free too. So I took the Percocet and discovered that all it did was make me sleepy and pain-free-ish. Number 6, I expected the doctor's orders to be easy to follow for post-operative recovery. They tell you, whatever you do, don't get constipated, but don't get diarrhea either. And at all costs, don't strain and don't push when you're trying to have a bowel movement. And here's your painkillers, which cause constipation. So here is your stool softener. But don't take too much of it because you don't want to go to diarrhea town. Meanwhile, we've cut your asshole so it's swollen to about the diameter of a pencil, but don't strain as you try to push out that dry sponge of a turd. The result of this advice was me on my knees in the fetal position on the bathroom floor, sobbing, naked. And you know what? I had to strain. There is no way that I could live my life like that without pushing or straining. So it had to happen. The body made it happen. It was involuntary. It's how the body do. Number 7, I expected to handle the surgery with poise and grace. The reality, I think I managed it pretty well until day 3, as I ran around the house like a wild animal, crying, frenzied and wild-eyed, and bare-ass naked, trying to figure out how I was going to get this constipated turd out of me. Percocet. The answer was Percocet. Number 8, I expected to be back to my regular life after 7 days max. The reality? No fucking way. It's such a load of shit. They told me after 5 to 7 days I could probably return to activity and do heavy lifting. It was more like 5 to 7 weeks. And even after 5 to 7 weeks, I had lost so much weight and muscle mass that I was not able to return at full capacity. Number 9, I expected to maintain my relationship with food throughout the recovery. The reality is I developed a fear of eating. I couldn't eat anything without having to consider the fact that it was going to come out of me the next day and what that was going to feel like. So I figured out what would work and I stuck with it, which ended up with me having a very repetitive food cycle. I wish I could say that it was better and that it went away with the surgery, but it hasn't. I still have a lot of anxiety surrounding food and what I eat. Number 10, I expected to be calm and relaxed during my recovery. The reality, I was so afraid of ripping open the surgery site and re-injuring myself, or just basically nullifying the whole process and the whole procedure. I kept imagining that's what was happening every time I had a bowel movement and I would feel that pain, which of course then would make me tense as my body would start to guard against the pain, making it all the worse. As I wiped, there would be fresh blood and other fluids that were not recognizable, drainage fluids from the surgical site, and that was very scary to see as well. I mean, I knew that drainage was a part of it and that surgical sites ooze and they drain, and that is part of the process, but the fresh blood was what was particularly scary, especially because that's what we had to measure to make sure I didn't have to go back in or I didn't re-injure myself. It wasn't all in my head, but my head was definitely making the whole situation work by imagining something that wasn't actually happening, at least not the way I thought it was. What I was told only after I called in a frenzied, crying state, after I'd been running around the house like a naked animal the whole time. Well, I was a naked animal, humans are animals, but you get the gist. What I was told by them was that the surgical site isn't expected to stay closed, that it's a dynamic area that's going to open the wound and close it again with every bowel movement. And to a degree, it's expected. That's why the bleeding, the pain, all that was considered normal. It's a dynamic area where we have this wound and they're asking us to poop and fart through it. So yeah, that was expected to open, heal, but then reopen off and on, which is why the recovery takes so much longer than what they initially told me. I mean, what the fuck? Number 11. I expected my asshole pretty much to be the same visually. I didn't have high expectations that I was going to change the terrain that much down there, but I did hope. The reality, my asshole has gone from Lovecraftian to puffy starfish. I'll take it. I know because I had to check to make sure that it wasn't getting infected at the surgical site. So camera to the rescue, which really made for an interesting camera roll. And number 12, I expected to not get depressed during the recovery. The reality, I got depressed, and it wasn't a mild depression. I got heavily depressed. So depressed that I felt like I had to reach out to somebody as a lifeline because I was getting very dodgy in terms of safety. So I did reach out to people to help protect myself, and it worked. It was really helpful to have somebody outside acknowledge the pain that I was in, and also to point out that was the most likely culprit for my depression, since I had no obvious signs as to why. There's no external reason why I would be depressed, except for the pain. I mean, not only is recovery painfully isolating, especially if you're not on social media like me. Your whole pain neural network is activated. It's on fire because it's dealing with this surgical site and all the pain and healing. And it's got drugs and hormones are fluctuating. That adds to all of the experience, and it opens the gate for depression to piggyback right in on that pain network. And that's exactly what it did. So here are a few of the things that I've learned. Number one, there is definitely a place for painkillers. I've always been I wanted to stay away from them. They scared me, not only just because of they make people sick, but also the addictive properties of it. There is a use for them. Number two, I learned to take your painkillers as prescribed, because that's what got me off that floor when I was naked, was taking the painkillers, and the painkillers on schedule was able to keep the pain at bay enough that I didn't have the fear of the pain because I couldn't really feel it, and I was able to pass. Even with still straining, I was still able to pass with no damage. No damage than what was normally expected of that healing process. Number three, pain is so deeply entwined and enmeshed with pain and depression. It was fascinating to feel my pain and to watch the thoughts and the feelings that would come marching in terms of fear and the fantasies of ripping and tearing that my mind would create, and then the depressive thoughts that would come in out of nowhere. So it was very fascinating to see that, and how much that was driven just by being in pain, because I was not having any of those issues before the surgery, and then during the recovery, that's what brought it on. Number three, because of that tightly enmeshed relationship with pain and depression and fear, it is highly recommended by me, and you don't have to take my advice, but set up some lifelines, some support lines outside of yourself, of people that you can tell that you are very depressed, especially if you're going to be going into a scheduled pain experience like surgery, where you know that one of the results of the experience is going to be pain, or it's going to put you in pain that you're going to have to endure for a specific amount of time. Get support for your mental health during that time, because depression can and will piggyback on it if it's there. If those neural pathways are open, it can come marching right in. And number five, what I've learned is I can totally rely on the sweet amnesia that extreme pain tends to provide after the experience. I don't really remember exactly how it felt, and I think that's for good reason, because if I should ever for some reason have to have this surgery again, I don't want to have the fresh, intense feelings and memories of it, so that I would say no, I don't want to touch that again. I guess like childbirth. I don't know. And if anyone was wondering, the Botox, pretty nice. It does have an effect. I can tell a difference. It's the difference between pushing and relaxing into your bowel movements. And Botox is now teaching me the latter because, high tonality in the sphincter. It's nice to kind of know the difference. And on top of that, my farts are not as loud.
So I got that going for me, which is nice.
All right, so that's me. I'm laying this out just in case there's anybody that's ever going to have these procedures done. This was my experience. It may not be your experience, and I am glad I did the surgery, and it is improving my quality of life as it was promised. But there was definitely a time period between now and the surgery back in June that I wasn't sure I made the right decision. And I know from forums online that is a constant thought that maybe I made a mistake, because it feels worse before it gets better. Much like many things in life. I still stand by my word, talk about your assholes, and I love everyone, and I will see you guys in the next video. How cliched is it for me to say that, but it's true. Okay, love you. See you guys later. Going outro. Bye. You don't like the hoodie? You don't like the hoodie? Well, you better come and get it, Jason.